Inside North Dakota Politics with Nicholas Kwolek, Josh Meny, and political correspondent Maddie Beer-Temple.
A good Sunday to you. Thank you for joining us for Inside North Dakota Politics. I'm Nicholas Kwolek.
I'm Josh Meny.
And I'm Maddie Beer-Temple. We have a lot to get to for our first show in October. And because it's October, that means we are getting closer and closer to the election.
And in what could be called the first October surprise of this election cycle, we learned early Friday morning that President Trump and his wife Melania have tested positive for COVID-19.
The president tweeted the news in the middle of the night. He said, quote, "We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together," end quote. We also learned Friday that the president was experiencing minor symptoms of the virus.
This all came after one of his closest aides, Hope Hicks, tested positive for the virus on Wednesday. She traveled with President Trump to Minnesota and Ohio this week. Now the White House's physician's office is conducting contact tracing. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden tweeted that his thoughts and prayers are with the president and first lady for a swift recovery.
Senator Kevin Cramer commented on President Trump's positive COVID-19 diagnosis during a press conference regarding his meeting with Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Cramer said he is praying for a recovery of the president, and he has no reason to believe his meeting with Barrett, who met with Trump last week, would put him at risk for the virus. The senator also said he doesn't think the president's diagnosis will affect the nomination process because of the frequent testing of senators and White House staff. He noted that the 74-year-old president is in a vulnerable age category, but seems otherwise healthy.
He's probably going to work through it. I wish he'd probably relax a little more than he probably is going to, because he doesn't relax, as you know very well. By that I mean he doesn't take a lot of breaks. He runs very hard and fast, and so I'm sure he'll find a way to pace himself, but I'm also confident that he'll come through it just fine.
Now, earlier in the week, President Trump and former Vice President Biden squared off in a debate, and it was contentious, to put it mildly.
You were a senator. And
You're
by
the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe, I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe.
That's about how it went for the nearly 90 minutes between the two men, with moderator Chris Wallace trying to keep control.
No, the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
that
get rid
is
of
absolutely
you know what,
not true.
You're doing it.
You're going to
Not
have
true,
gentlemen. I hate to raise my voice, but it seems to be. Why should I be different than the two of you? So here's the deal.
Good point.
The nominees debated about handling COVID, reopenings, mask usage, and campaign rallies.
Well, so far, we have had no problem whatsoever. It's outside. That's a big difference, according to the experts. And we do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, as you see. I mean, and literally on 24 hours notice. And Joe does the circles and has 3 people someplace.
Okay.
By the way, did you see one of the last big rallies he had? And a reporter came up to him to ask him a question. He said, no, stand back. Put on your mask. Put on a mask. Have you been tested? I'm way far away from those other people. That's what he said. I can't. I'm going to be okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing in one another.
We've had no negative effect.
No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect. And we've had 35, 40,000 people at these rallies.
And after the dust had settled, we went into our community to hear from people like you. How did they feel about the debate? Residents of Minot told us how they felt.
It was a bit of a circus.
I think Trump did a pretty decent job, considering he was debating 2 people.
I think they were both acting ridiculous. I think it was, Trump was rude because he kept interrupting.
Well, the election is 30 days away, but many North Dakotans are already casting their votes through the mail. So we wanted to talk about common vote-by-mail mistakes. Election officials in both Burleigh and Morton County tell us they have been flooded with calls from people questioning why they received a ballot in the mail. In most cases, the individual forgot they requested a general election ballot back before June's primary election. Meanwhile, last week, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania ruled that the state will throw out naked ballots named for ballots returned without being in their secrecy sleeve. Officials in North Dakota tell us if you've already returned your ballot and you forgot that sleeve, you'll be fine.
There's nothing in law that states that we need that coming back in. And we see ballots all the time where we just have the ballot inside of of this envelope, and that's fine. We accept that. It's really up to the voter if they want to use the secrecy sleeve.
Meanwhile, if you'll be voting in person this time around, be prepared to see some new technology. Morton County election officials say they've finally done away with the old poll books and highlighters in favor of these new electronic poll books. They tell voters where they should be voting, if in fact they show up to the wrong polling location. Now, in the past, workers would just write the voter's name in the poll book and let them vote. Election officials say the new poll books will cut down on potential Election Day problems.
If a voter tries to go to one polling site and vote and then tries to go to another one later in the day, that'll be prevented because somebody or the database will have been updated saying that person voted.
She adds they wanted to do this several years ago, but they kept having to be cut from the budget because of lower oil revenues.
And there's still a lot more to come on Inside North Dakota politics, including a close look at the race for North Dakota's U.S. House seat, starting with an interview with Congressman Kelly Armstrong. That's up next.
For the past 10 years, Healthy Systems USA has been helping people lose weight. Are you ready to be next? Save $200 off a 2-month program and get free shipping. It's our 10th anniversary sale. Save $200 and free shipping at Healthy Systems USA. Order now.
With a unique spirit and unrivaled grit, nothing stops a North Dakotan. It's no surprise Governor Doug Burgum's balancing the budget without raising taxes, strengthening and diversifying the economy, and forged peaceful resolution with out-of-state protesters. North Dakota always overcomes. Now Burgum and North Dakota are confronting a global pandemic and rising to the challenge, saving lives and livelihoods. Confident we'll emerge stronger because that's the North Dakota way.
Every 3 days, someone in North Dakota dies by suicide.
And the power of one phone call can make a difference.
Your life matters. You have a purpose.
First Link can help you find support in your area. Reach out. You don't have to struggle alone.
This isn't the end of your story. Let's find hope together. Call First Link 211 or 1-800-273-TALK.
You rely on your website to drive business. Partner with a team that specializes in website design and marketing strategies to have it work around the clock for you. Take the next step. KXNet.com/result driven. Find employees with the new HireClick job posting system on KXNet Jobs, all the job boards that matter for one low price. AGT Foods is now hiring for multiple positions with competitive wages and great development opportunities. View this job and more at KXNetJobs.com.
For the past 10 years, Healthy Systems USA has been helping people lose weight. Are you ready to be next? Save $200 off a 2-month program and get free shipping. It's our 10th anniversary sale. Save $200 and free shipping at Healthy Systems USA. Order now.
Inside North Dakota politics on KX.
U.S. Representative for North Dakota's at-large congressional district, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, joins us now to discuss the U.S. House race. Thank you for being here, Congressman Armstrong.
Thanks for having me.
Your opponent, Zach Rachnerud, says the economic downturn brought on by COVID-19 serves as evidence that our economy is not working for the low and middle class. His solution resembles Bernie Sanders' platform calling for universal health care, free education, erasing student debt, and free child care. From what I understand, you're not in favor of this economic model. So what are your solutions for the current economic challenges we face?
Well, first, we need to get our economy open back up. There's no government program alive that will account for 100% loss of the economy. And essentially, during this COVID pandemic, particularly when it started, we essentially asked everybody to quit participating in the economy. So we need to get the virus under control, and then we need to get the economy back open. But just overall, I think North Dakota is the absolute antithesis of what my opponent is talking about. And by that, I mean, look at our growth over the last 10 years. Private industry, oil, ag, innovation, technology sectors. We were one of the few places in the entire world that didn't see the economic recession in 2010. And government didn't create those jobs. Private businesses, and that's why our wage growth was good. Our population was increasing, and the average age of our population was decreasing. And all of those are due to private equity, private investment, And that's the reason North Dakota is one of the best places to live and work in the entire world.
And from what I understand, you know, you're a low regulation, in favor of capitalism. But in a time like this, in a global pandemic, in a crisis like this, is this perhaps a time to maybe put a little, press the brake pedal in terms of capitalism and maybe go more in favor of government kind of taking a universal, mobilized response to this crisis?
Well, sure. I mean, and again, that goes back. I voted for bills during this pandemic that I don't think under any normal circumstances any true conservative would support. But again, when you have essentially asked all of your entire population to quit participating in the economy, you owe it to them to do that. Listen, not every single small business had the same flaw in their business that caused them to have problems all at the same time. So I was proud to support the first two CARES packages, the PPP program, the lifelines that have kept our small businesses afloat through the course of this pandemic. And it's really, truly unfortunate that we can't come together as in a divided Congress and get another extension done. But targeted financial support for a once in a lifetime pandemic does not mean overall substantial long-term changes to more government involvement in our lives.
Well, speaking of government involvement, as you know, the case numbers here in our state, North Dakota, are high. Do you think right now is the time for a mask mandate?
I don't think you can ever do a mandate unless you're willing to enforce it. And I think that is, and that, by the way, that doesn't go in this pandemic. I spent 10 years as a criminal defense attorney. I have a passion for criminal justice reform, and I have that view on any penalty you are putting in code. So if you're going to do a mandate, you better be willing to enforce it. Otherwise, I think we need to continue to talk to people about wearing masks, continue to work forward with those types of things. But if you're not willing to strictly enforce the mandate, then it doesn't make any sense to do it. And I don't think the North Dakota people from one end of the state are willing to see grandma or grandpa get arrested on their way into Starbucks. So if you're not going to enforce the mandate, there's no reason to have it.
Okay, moving on to a new subject, but it involves law enforcement. The death of George Floyd sparked a nationwide movement against police brutality. It also brought on calls for defunding and abolishing police departments. How will you address police reform here in North Dakota?
Well, I'm proud of the work I did on criminal justice reform when I was in the state Senate. But I think that's a really good question, and that's been my frustration out in Congress. 2 million out of the 2.3 million people incarcerated in this country are incarcerated in state and local prisons. And so when you have a one-size-fits-all from the federal government, we live in a place where oftentimes backup is measured in hours and not minutes. And in the federal government's quest to solve inner city policing issues, I have not seen a program yet that wouldn't have a significant detriment to rural law enforcement. And not the least of which is, these guys have really hard jobs. None of us live in a scenario where every time we get out of the car, we could be subject to extreme violence and danger. That's what most of our law enforcement men and women deal with every single day they go out. So we need to recognize that the overwhelming majority of them are good people doing a really tough job. But more importantly, we need to realize that law enforcement is a local function. We elect our state's attorneys, we elect our sheriffs. So if we're going to do things like more de-escalation training, provide grants for those types of things, and we can run them through states' existing structures, then I would support that. But sweeping unfunded mandates from the federal government are a terrible idea in any scenario, and they're doubly bad when you're dealing with law enforcement.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but stay with us on Inside North Dakota Politics. After the break, we're talking with the congressman's opponent in the U.S. House race, Zach Racknerud.
There are all kinds of voters, like early voter Ed or absentee Abby. No? How about vote by mail Marie or election day Dave? Ed does everything early. Dave's not late, but he's also not early. Marie's got this. Abby can't miss out. There she is. They all made plans to make sure their voices are heard. What's your plan? Visit vote.nd.gov. Voting in North Dakota, it takes all kinds.
It's tough, it's competitive, and it's game time. Things get real on Friday Night Football Frenzy. Join KX Sports for the breakdown of the biggest performances and the best upsets from teams around the region. Keep up on all the scores and highlights as Phil Bonatti, Luke Gamble, and David Gibson bring you the best Friday night high school football action in Western North Dakota. Friday Night Football Frenzy, only on KX News, sponsored by ENG Lending.
Menards has what you need to make towing easy. Make sure your vehicle has the right equipment with TowSmart. Get the toughest jobs done right with our complete line of towing equipment and accessories. All TowSmart equipment is 11% off. Add extra security to your load with Smart Straps ratchet straps. Check out Menards' great selection and get 11% off. All Smart Straps ratchet straps now at Menards.
Save big money at Menards.
Take a fresh look at what's happening in North Dakota politics with an in-depth weekly program designed to bring you everything you need to make an informed decision in November. Watch Inside North Dakota Politics with hosts Nicholas Kwolek, Josh Meny, and political correspondent Maddie Beer Temple. Find out how the 2020 election in North Dakota is shaping up and get all the facts on issues that hit close to home. Before you choose this November, get all the facts here on Inside North Dakota Politics, Sunday mornings at 10:30, only on KX News. Inside North Dakota Politics on KX.
Democratic Nonpartisan League candidate for North Dakota's at-large congressional district, Zach Racknerud, joins us now. Hi, Zach. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start. COVID-19 is the worst recession we've seen since the Great Depression. How is what's going on with our economy exemplify the issues that you see with our system?
Yeah, I entered the race in January because I saw what I refer to as a reverse funnel economy, where wealth is flowing upwards in this country, but the bottom lines of our working and middle class are continuing to struggle. And the COVID-19 pandemic really blew that wide open and showed the fundamental flaws in our economy. I think there's a lot of opportunity for investments in healthcare, childcare, post-secondary ed, the sorts of things that Congress has the ability to make those investments. And so I'm excited to bring forward solutions and policy proposals in that sense.
Yeah, and wealth disparity, something we're also seeing is that the billionaires are getting more wealthy while the lower classes are losing money during this COVID-19. Explain that. Explain how you would find solutions for that.
Yeah, it's been incredible to witness that we've seen just a handful of, at the very top of the economy, have amassed hundreds of billions of dollars during this pandemic, while at the same time, working people, tens of millions have lost their jobs, lost their health care, their economic dignity ripped away. It really shows fundamental flaws that are in this economy, and it shows how urgently we need to address it. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Now, if elected, how would you bring your economic platform to our state?
Yeah, it's really just about making the investments in everybody. For example, I think that healthcare coverage should be something that everybody has at all times, and we can do that by expanding Medicare to cover everybody. We can implement a 2% wealth tax on fortunes that exceed $55 million, and that can fund universal child care services in this country. Looking at those sorts of avenues that invest in everybody across the board, including people here in North Dakota, would lift up this nation at a time that we're in crisis.
Now, your opponent, Congressman Armstrong, just says there simply isn't enough money for that. We'd have to tax everyone across the board. What do you say to that?
Well, it's not true. A lot of these policy positions have been studied, and the 2% wealth tax would fund that universal child care. If you look at every single thing across the board, there's a big price tag, but at the same time, there's plenty of opportunity for funding mechanisms, and we don't have to raise taxes on working people to do it.
Now, is looking towards the federal government for more guidance. A lot of folks, including your opponents, say that the federal government is more expensive and less effective.
With domestic policy, I mean, when you make the investments at the local level, that sort of thing is negated. The federal government's job is to collect that revenue and to allow our state and local governments to make those investments how they see fit. So it's really a two-edged sword in the sense that it's federal taxing, but it's administered locally.
Now let's go back to pandemic. Is it time, you know, you've seen the numbers, North Dakota is on the rise. It's one of the states being hit the hardest right now by COVID-19. Is it time for a mask mandate?
I think it has to be strongly considered for sure. The enforcement is what a lot of folks will get hung up on. How do you enforce it? But what I think it really allows to happen is for our business community to be able to enforce the mandate without having to worry about what their competition down the street is doing. It would allow us all as a collective in this nation to take the pandemic seriously and to crush this thing so we can get back to normal life again.
Now, as everyone has seen, the death of George Floyd has brought on protests across the nation, calls for defunding, even abolishing the police. What do you say? How does it, you know, we're obviously different than downtown Minneapolis. How do you bring solutions for police brutality here in the Peace Garden State?
Yeah, the whole framing of defund the police is unfortunate in my mind because at the end of the day, the opposite needs to happen. We need to have more funding for our law enforcement in order to improve training, to improve hiring standards. Law enforcement officers probably should make more money. And all these sorts of investments would allow our officers to be more well equipped to handle the job, as well as tackling other issues in our economy like poverty and homelessness and mental health issues. Making those investments would overall improve the situation more, but not defunding the police.
All right, real quick, Zach, what's your final pitch to North Dakotan voters?
That I'm a working person for working people. I'm a working class guy myself, and when I look out across our government and economy, I see much needed investment in our working people, and so I'm excited to bring forward positions that make that investment and don't raise taxes on working people because we're facing economic numbers that are troubling, and we need to have that investment.
All right, there you have it. Democratic Nonpartisan League candidate for North Dakota's at-large congressional district, Zach Rachnerud. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, we're taking a closer look at Measure 1 on this year's state ballot. Stay with us.
Your weather matters, and we've got you covered.
Get a personal forecast you can count on. Just ask.
Hey, Tom! How's the weather?
Record a video with your name and where you're from, and I'll give you a personal forecast on KX News. It's that easy. Just send in your video via Facebook or email and say,
Hey, Tom! How's the weather?
Hey, Tom, how's the weather? Sponsored by Affinity First Federal Credit Union. Friday Night Football Frenzy is back. Join KX Sports for all the scores and highlights of the best high school football action from around the region. Friday Night Football Frenzy at 10, only on KX News. Sponsored by ENG Lending.
Uncle Matteo's Pizza Joint is looking to hire someone like you. Become part of our team serving delicious fresh pizzas. Apply in person or at UncleMatteos.com. Come join the fun at Uncle Matteo's Pizza Joint. Served with love.
The game is over, and you still can't get enough? Get the inside look with KX Sports After the Whistle every Sunday nights at 10:35. Review the greatest plays and most shocking upsets of the week, plus impactful stories on athletes that go beyond the game. Catch up on the action with Phil Bonatti, Luke Gamble, and David Gibson to tackle all the latest sports news, highlights, and scores. After the Whistle, Sunday nights at 10:35, exclusively on KX.
The whole works is awesome.
North Dakota has built a living tribute to veterans and their spouses, a place they call home, a home where fellow veterans relish in the camaraderie of their peers, a home where staff are truly vested in the lives of those they care for. The North Dakota Veterans Home has 52 skilled nursing home beds and 98 basic care beds, with rooms that are private and have a private bathroom, a living tribute to veterans and their spouses in Lisbon, North Dakota.
Inside North Dakota Politics on KX.
Ballots are now trickling into mailboxes statewide for the roughly 170,000 who requested to vote absentee.
Let's talk about those ballots, specifically what's on them. Maddie, we talked about the presidential debate earlier in the show, but you also looked into a debate, or lack thereof, of a different kind here in North Dakota.
That's right, Nicholas. While there's been a lot of debate over Measure 3, which is now off the ballot, and Measure 2, which is still on the ballot, there hasn't been that much talk over Measure 1. And so if you haven't heard about it, let me explain. Measure 1 was put on the ballot by the legislature after it passed the Senate in 2019.
Resolution is passed.
If passed, it will significantly alter the makeup of the State Board of Higher Education. Among the biggest changes, it would nearly double the number of board members from 8 to 15, increase their term length from 4 to 6 years, and prohibit elected officials from serving on the board.
Board members were overworked. The task was too much. It was too overwhelming. So our solution was to increase the board members so that they would have more time and availability to work into subcommittees.
Senator Joan Heckeman introduced the measure alongside 5 other lawmakers.
They're not hired full-time. They are not employed full-time. And that makes it very difficult for some of the work to get done. Expanding the board gives them an opportunity to actually get into the campuses themselves.
But not everyone agrees with the expansion, including Erica Solberg, who holds the sole student seat on the board.
Our voice, if the measure is passed, is cut in half. You know, there's not a doubling of the student position. So I think that's very troubling to see that with this measure, the student voice would be cut in half.
Solberg says other students agree with her.
I'm in contact with the student body presidents at each of the 11 institutions pretty regularly, and unanimously what I keep hearing is they don't want the board to double, they don't want their voice to be diminished.
Senator Donald Scheibel says the idea got started when Governor Burgum introduced a bill to change the state's governance system of higher education.
It was started in the House, and it met with quite a bit of resistance, and that was to create a board, I believe, for NDSU, UND, and then a separate board for the rest of the colleges.
But instead of separate boards, lawmakers eventually settled on expanding the size of the single board with the hope that the increase would allow members to specialize and form subcommittees. As for the student seat, Scheibel says there was even discussion about eliminating his or her vote entirely.
We obviously think that the student voice is very important, but when you're on a board of this magnitude and this size, you know, it takes more than a year or two to even become acclimated in doing a good job.
If passed, the measure would go into effect June of 2021.
And Nicholas and Josh, the measure does come with a price tag, $147,000 every 2 years, and that's meant to cover the additional expenses associated with the board members traveling to the campuses.
Yet another decision for voters to make this year. Now, Maddie, it seems like the increased term length is meant for the board members to have more time to handle the work. What would that work be?
Right, so since the board oversees 11 public institutions in North Dakota, they span all across the state. So getting to visit those individual campuses all across the state and meet with students and faculty there would be what that is for.
That's a lot for a lot of the voters to swallow coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely, and thanks for joining us on Inside North Dakota Politics.
Yes, thanks for watching and enjoy your Sunday.